Welcome to the Get Emergent podcast, where we discuss leadership, team, and organizational topics and best practices. We like to provide ideas, concepts, and pragmatic experiments to help you develop your potential in your work and your leadership. I'm Bill Berthel.
And I'm Ralph Simone.
Ralph, today we're going to talk about humility and specifically how being agile is a form of humility, being agile and humble.
I was intrigued by this title, and I'd like you to say more. First of all, I was a little concerned you picked it because perhaps I wasn't being as humble as I needed to be. But how would you differentiate between the two, and how are we putting them together?
Yeah, so this is not aimed at you, Ralph. It is not. It's not chosen for that. But this is a place to discuss not just humility, but also agility, right? Being agile is a great way of demonstrating our humility. I think sometimes we perhaps are concerned about or don't choose humility because we're concerned that's about us not being able to fully participate. And it's not that at all. It's really about being agile to have others contribute at a high level too. It's really making room for others.
I like that. With that explanation, it's like if you're overly confident in your point of view, you often don't make room for other people and for yourself to learn something new.
And if we stick with the idea of agility, I think that overconfidence can look rigid sometimes. It can look like we're fixed or we're set, right? Not demonstrating humility very well. We've all been there. We've all been in some type of fixed way or hyper-focused kind of way. And sometimes our work demands that. I think of my son. He is maybe like a typical preteen. There are times where his attention is everywhere. It's not very focused. But when he's doing something that's really important or something he's deeply enjoying, he's in that state of flow where he's hyper-focused and there is no getting him out of that, right? That's a form of rigidness with purpose. So sometimes we need that kind of hyper-focus. I'm not suggesting that we're always agile because that can look floppy and aloof, but we want to be agile in the right ways at the right times to demonstrate humility.
It occurs to me that there's some unlearning that might need to be done by some of us in order to become more agile and humble.
I love that. Probably for many of us. Yeah, there's some unlearning, right? I think it was Maslow that famously said, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And one reason I think we see everything as nails is because we're successful. Our hammer has been working, right? And so there sometimes is some unlearning where switching out the tool or switching out the approach or switching out our style in which we're leading, all forms of agility shows a humbleness in our work, in our leadership, in our relationships.
Seems like agility gives us the opportunity to put more arrows in our quiver.
Love it. And I think the time to reach for a better arrow as well. I think one form of agility, we often talk about strategic pauses, right? It's a form of agility where we can be maybe patient or strategically taking that pause and not being impatient. That can look really rigid and overconfident sometimes, moving too fast.
Well, let me put you on the spot. Are there times when you feel, or situations that you feel you're not agile or humble enough?
Oh, for me, yeah, it is around time. It is around the tolerance of time. And as a kid, my mom would always, share the lessons of patience. And my answer to her was always, I can't be patient. It takes too long, right? So it's been a lifelong, I don't want to say challenge, but it's a lifelong opportunity for me to improve. Humility applied to time is patience. I'm like this most frequently behind the wheel of a vehicle. I can get really impatient. I think it was George Carlin that said everyone in the windshield are idiots and everyone in the rearview mirror is a loser, right? A humble driver would be patient and probably safer too. I think a humble leader slows down to go faster and gives space for others, right? I think a humble leader is not just tolerant of time, but utilizes time in a very meaningful way that creates more agility and humility.
Seems like a humble leader would not always go first.
Love that.
Because in going first, you may crowd out or make it more challenging for others to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that going first is sometimes seen as what a leader does. We see a leader in the front or in the front of a pack, and it's really interesting. We can take some lessons from the animal kingdom. More contemporary research around wolf packs actually suggests the leader of those packs are actually in the back. They actually have a better view. They allow others not to just to go first, but to develop in the pack without their direct or immediate presence. So sometimes it's going something closer to last.
Humility would be helpful in the development of people or in delegating tasks, right? Being humble enough to know that there are other people who can do what you do well, or almost as well, or in some cases better.
Absolutely. And our business partner, Kathy Gaynor, often says it's extending that trust to allow others to build their potential. And that takes some humility as well, right? Letting go, maybe, surrendering an opportunity once in a while that will probably feel good to get done ourselves. It's not just delegating, right? I think we overuse that word sometimes. It's really giving the space to extend trust, to build other people's potential. And that's through humility too.
So I'm curious as to how you guide or help a leader to cultivate this humility, particularly if you encounter someone who is extremely confident, knows more than anybody else, is ahead of everybody else. They don't even see the need or the benefit, right? I mean, how would you create the opening with somebody that seems to lack any awareness towards humility?
You've given me the term, the curse of competency. Sometimes when we talk about our projects at home, I'm a DIYer, but I've almost never had a contractor in my own home. And you've graciously said that's the curse of competency because I'm able to do many of those things. But one way I can practice some agility and humility in that space and actually build more time for myself to do some other things I enjoy, it's choosing that strategic place to start practicing that, right? So for me at home, it's a little bit of like, who could I get to hire out a project or two? I think in the workplace, it could be who has either the potential or the skill sets, and they don't have to be perfect at it, right? Who has the capacity, the commitment, the desire to lean into this project? And how can I extend the trust and hand that off? So I think it's choosing a strategic place to start.
So it seems like the use of agility and humility would lead to scaling an organization. It would lead to higher levels of engagement. It would lead to, I think, more satisfaction.
I think it's scaling. I think you're absolutely right. Right. And that gets us to really working on what matters most. It's building more scale, not just on your team, but that next scale out, that next fractal out is through the organization, through the whole enterprise.
So what are some of the characteristics of a humble and agile leader? I mean, what do they do in their day-to-day?
You shared the idea of perhaps not going first. I think that can show up in many different ways. One way that can show up is asking more questions than telling or sharing advice too soon or too quickly. Another way is, if it's a group setting or a team kind of setting, establish some conversational turn-taking opportunities. Make sure other people's voices are not just being heard, but facilitating, maybe going around the room. Or if it's around technology, it's making sure we're including the folks that are dialing in or video conferencing in as well. Really build those opportunities for other people to participate.
So it seems like there could be some dated paradigms or limiting beliefs that a leader has that he or she needs to know everything, needs to have all the answers. And if that was their paradigm, they would be less inclined to ask questions.
I think so. So I think you're right. I think there's a bit of a paradigm or a mindset that we need not know all the answers. Honestly, I don't think that's possible, but we're talking about mindset, right? We can't know everything and know all the answers. We don't have to be the subject matter expert all the time. Perhaps it's more expertise in leadership by facilitating others in that space of contributing or answering or solving some challenges.
Got any stories that would kind of illustrate some of what you're talking about from your experience as a leader in an organization?
In an organization I used to be part of, we'd occasionally be lucky enough to have more work and orders than we could satisfy. Good business, lots of customer demands coming in. We had excellent cross training in our shop. It included many of the leaders, actually, not just cross training for those technical. It was a factory setting. It was manufacturing, not just the manufacturing folks, but we actually had cross training out past just those technicians and folks that were on the factory floor. So when we had these really good problem, right? Good problems, so much customer demand. Sometimes it came before price increases. We had a cycle of price increases on an annual basis. So, we trained our customer in a way how to order before those price increases came in. We would create this call to arms, is what we called it, throughout the whole shop. And that call to arms meant just that there's so much workload on the shop floor, we could use assistance from other places in the organization. This is a place where leaders were asked to put lower priority items aside and provide quote unquote shift work, right? On that shop floor. It was both agile and humble.
Yeah.
Right. Not that any work is beneath anyone, never that mindset. And quite honestly, it was fun because not only did we get more stuff done, we got to connect with folks we weren't regularly working with on a daily basis.
Well, what's becoming clear to me is that this combination of agility and humility allows the task to be the boss.
Well, yes.
The context drives the behavior, not the rank, not where you sit in the organization, because you're trained to do multiple things and you're humble enough to pitch in where necessary.
And as you say that, it brings me back to some of those experiences. It was just that some of the work was messy or, dirty or very wet. And it didn't matter where you sat in the organization that day. You might have been, scrubbing buckets or cleaning something pretty messy up. Didn't matter if you were the CEO, CFO, or who you were in the pit scrubbing too. It was exactly that the task demanded.
So if I was a listener and I was a confident leader who needed a little more humility and I wasn't really flexible, where might we suggest I start?
I'd start with reframing that it's not about eroding confidence. I think your confidence is a gift and your knowledge base is a gift. It's reframing it to know that may not be needed first, that your agility to shift, to be a leader who can facilitate others, to pull the best out of other people's contributions, to make sure that you're not going first. You're not just either blurting out the answer or being the fastest or smartest person in the room all the time.
The other thing that seems it would be helpful is there are many ways to do anything.
Yeah.
And I remember in teaching my kids, one thing I thought I did well is when they asked me how to do something, I would share, well, here is a way.
Love it.
But there are many other ways. What way can you think of? And that seems to be perhaps a strategy for developing agility and humility.
I love that. And I think to, net that out, I think we call that leader as coach. I think that's coaching, right? Asking a little bit more than telling or sharing, getting the individual's best approach or best answers and putting that to action.
So what would we leave our listeners with around this topic as far as either a call to action or a reflection question?
A learning for me in this space that I hope is helpful for our listeners is just to choose a strategic place to start practicing more humility. A specific relationship, a specific context or situation. Maybe it's in how you run meetings. Maybe it's a specific relationship you have with a direct report. Just practicing more strategically, choosing that relationship or situation, and then see what unfolds from that. Second, I think we're flexing with purpose. That's what agility is. We're flexing our style. We're flexing our approach with purpose. I like to start each day with setting an intention of where I call it being creative, but I think it's being agile. Where will I be agile and look for a different way to do something today? And so how will you set your daily intentions? I find those early in the morning to be best. I like to set an early morning intention of looking for an opportunity to be agile. And again, I frame it as creative.
It seems like one thing that's coming up for me, I might ask some of the people I interact with a lot, where would it be useful for you or our team for me to be a little more flexible or agile?
Love the vulnerability in that. And I love the service behind that because you'll get, I think, eventually real answers from folks.
Yeah, nice. It seems like it requires some level of humility.
Yes.
That you don't know.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks, Ralph. And folks, thanks for listening. You can listen to a new podcast 2 times every month here at Get Emergent or wherever you listen to podcasts. This is where we bring you contemporary leadership topics and ideas balanced with what we hope you find are better practices that you can apply to your work and your leadership. Thank you.